Okay. And you can see the pointer as well.
Yeah, you can see the pointer.
Okay. So this talk is not is an independent talk. It's not sponsored. So my impression actually is that in a present day sleep scenario is that we are sleep deprived society, and sleep deprivation is what I see in a lot of my patients and friends. So that's become one of my favorite topics actually after because of nutrition and other things. So sleep is naturally a recurring state of arousal. I want to go into very deep things into sleep. Babu knows more about sleep than I do, but it's very important that it's behaviorally characterized by an altered consciousness, uh, which the difference between sleep and non-sleep or death is that you can wake someone up from sleep, the simplest definition. So the stages of sleep, as we know, are NREM, non-rapid eye movement, and rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep. So NREM sleep is the initial part of sleep, and we have something called the hypnic jerks, which is very important. And the waking up, if you wake someone up at that time, they felt like they've not slept at all. And one of the important things is this is a kind of a drifting sensation, which is evolution. We call it an evolutionary hangover, which might have stopped us from falling off trees after we sleep well. So this is quite an important part of NREM. And after NREM, we go into the non-rapid eye movements. We go to stage two, which have got typical spindles, sleep spindles and K complexes on a EEG, and it lasts for about 20 minutes, depending again on the person to person, where now the blood pressure and metabolic function starts slowing down. It becomes harder to wake someone up in stage two. We then go into stage three, which is very important. It was called stage four as well, but we call it stage three now, or N3, where you have slow delta waves, difficult to wake up someone in stage three. And this is which is very important. Stage three is very important for repair processes. This is where you also have secretion of growth hormone, which is also important for immune system stimulation as well. And then, of course, you have REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, where most of the dreaming occurs. It's also called dream sleep, but it is not that dreaming doesn't occur in other sleep to stage two and stage three of NREM. So this is we can wake someone up easily here. But what's important is that this is a stage where you don't have much control on your skeletal muscles, and there's an increase in heart rate and respiration, typically very similar to being awake, which is very, very important. Um, and of course, what happens to us is we don't go through only one cycle. We go through at least 4 to 5 cycles, maybe even 6 cycles of sleep. And one has to remember that the sleep cycles will last from maybe around 70 minutes to 120 minutes. So it's very important to have these sleep cycles of at least 5 to 6 sleep cycles, which is very central to health. Of course, sleep can be measured in different ways using electroencephalograms as well. And this is another important part of what we need to look into, not just sleep. There's something called as a circadian rhythm. It is a biological rhythm in pretty ubiquitous in all living organisms. It's not very typical just for human beings. But what is important is that it is a part of other rhythms called as ultradian, circadian, and infradian. Ultradian is a very short cycles. It goes in minutes and seconds. So heartbeat is a typical part of it, and as well as your sleep is a typical part of ultradian. Growth hormone secretions are all ultradian, and then we have the circadian, which is a 24-hour cycle, and then of course we have the infradian, which is like example is a human menstrual cycle, which is more than a 24-hour cycle. So circadian is circadian, which means about a day, and this is very important. And we have broken that down into 24 hours, okay, for convenience sake. So this is a light and no light cycle. Let me take you through the activity. Sorry, this is a light and no light cycle. And what is important here is that this midnight to midnight cycle is seriously not looked into very much in our science or what we are taught about. We were never taught about circadian rhythms in our medical physiology either. So it's important to note that during the day we go through various changes in blood pressure, temperature, melatonin secretions, which reduce in the morning. There's an increase in blood pressure, as an increase in important hormones like cortisol. That's what wakes us up. Testosterone peaks over here. We're highly awake and alert, and that takes us through the day. And the best time to exercise is probably at this time when your cardiovascular efficiency and skeletal muscle is peak, but that doesn't happen because we are too busy with our routines during the day. During the night, again, around 9 or 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on what time the sun sets, melatonin starts secreting, and that goes through the night. So melatonin is a hormone of darkness, whereas cortisol is a hormone of light. Let me take it. So if you look at rhythms of life, circadian rhythm is very important because circadian rhythm is not just a simple clock. It is governed by something which is very important called as the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which is stimulated by light. Okay, and this SCN manages all the clocks in various organs, every cell in the body. So it is important to make sure that this light stimuli is present for most of us. And the other stimulus that can also stimulate a bit of this clocks in the body is food and exercise. So that is important as well, especially when you age. So when you look at the circadian rhythms as we age from infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and later life, the rhythm changes and the sleep patterns change, as well as cortisol and melatonin secretions change. Now, when we grow old, naturally melatonin secretion drops, and that is very, very important to note. This is a biological organ clock, very followed by the Chinese medicine TCM, and which is very interesting because every hour of the clock is assigned to various organs, and this might actually be important when we treat some people, which we don't even look into. I think it's very important. So what I'm trying to say is we need to look into human circadian rhythms and these biological clocks that are happening all the time. So one question, naturally one question is how much sleep do we need? So if you look at the recommended sleep time, depending on age, the amount of hours that we need vary. Okay, so when we are young adults, we need 7 to 9 hours, and that goes on till we are about 64, and after that maybe an hour less. So 7 to about 9 hours is typically what we need when we are adults, and children need many more hours than adults. So why do we bother about sleep? Are we not getting enough sleep? Actually not. So if you look at something, this is very interesting because this is data from Fitbit users. So Fitbit, the devices that you wear on your wrists, actually send data and they collect this data. And what is interesting is the number of hours of sleep in Japan is probably the least with 6.35 hours. India is the second worst, and that goes on. And New Zealand seems to have one of the best collection of sleep hours in its people. So this one indicates that we're not sleeping enough, and because of that, you have headlines like this: Indians least active and second most deprived people in the world. And things like Japan is worse than India, but India is the second. But this is not necessarily just seen in many other countries, as we saw earlier in that list. And you see that more sleep and the better the GDP. You can actually see in this graph that people in Luxembourg get good sleep and have a fantastic GDP, and they're wealthier. Singapore is here. More hours of sleep. Okay, let me continue again. Okay, so if you look at sleep, insufficient sleep causes a lot of economic challenges as well. So what about, we're looking at adults mostly, right? So what about children? So this is an interesting slide where we're looking at sleep deprivation in school children. And you're looking at male and female children. Only about 9% of boys and 8% of girls get actual enough sleep, which is ridiculous, because our children should be getting better sleep. And without sleep, they're not going to fare well in schools. So we don't get enough sleep. So what's the big deal, right? I mean, if you look at this is a meta-analysis of all-cause mortality in cardiovascular events. And what they see is that this is a J-shaped curve. So all of them kind of meet or are the lowest between around 7 hours. If you look at it, this is all-cause mortality, total cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular heart disease like coronary heart disease, CHD, and stroke. So you're looking at around 7 to 7.5 hours is the best for us to get rid of all these challenges. So that U-shaped curve is seriously very important. Now, what happens if you don't get enough sleep? If you don't get enough sleep, sleep deprivation causes a challenge with the immune system, which means that immune systems are important for various challenges, including cancers, infections, neurodegeneration, and cardiovascular disease. So this immune system deprivation causes a huge problem, and this is the problem that we also faced during COVID. So if you look at people, if you put them on sleep deprivation protocols and then recovery protocols, which is very short actually, you can see that their blood cells and the challenges with all their immune system cells like the NK cells also reduce in activity, which is very important to note. And they don't really come back to normalcy for a very long period of time, even if they're on a slow or a short sleep deprivation. We also know that studies show a lot of differences in total sleep deprivation. There's a big increased level of IL-1, IL-2. IL-1 is very interesting. That causes sleep, that induces sleep. Whereas IL-6 doesn't induce sleep. It is very important in inflammation. So there's always a challenge with all these different cytokines that are involved in inflammation and other markers in human beings. So if you look at infections, cold, flu, gastroenteritis, and other infection diseases are increased. Multi-organ sepsis and damage also increases with sleep deprivation. If you look at post-vaccination challenges, let's look at something like hepatitis B. You have a reduced long-term clinical protection after vaccination. So this became a big question that I used to ask people during COVID times as well. You need to get good sleep to have your vaccines really work on you, to make that amount of antibodies you need to fight any infection. Sleep is also interesting because it can cause deprivation, cause cancers like breast, colorectal, and prostate cancers. One of the important mechanisms that is involved here is a shorter duration of the night secretion of melatonin. Melatonin is one of my favorite molecules, and this seems to be a huge problem with many of us, because we don't sleep enough and we don't sleep right. So we're looking at also NDDs, that's neurodegenerative diseases, where you have challenges such as Alzheimer's. And we know that Alzheimer's, the beta amyloid plaques that you see in Alzheimer's disease causes a problem with a lot of people. You know that autoimmune diseases change, ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, there's an increase in SLE and systemic sclerosis. This is also very interesting. I just mentioned that coronary heart disease, increased risk of stroke and all-cause mortality. I look into sleep because a lot of my patients who come for metabolic challenges and obesity almost always have sleep deprivation. So this is an important thing. Insulin resistance, which is typically the initial part of type 2 diabetes mellitus, becomes a problem. Hypertension is a huge problem. So sleep disturbances should join the cardiovascular risk factors. And after all, just now, Kalpana, you just mentioned the AHA, American Heart Association, on the 29th of June, added sleep as a cardiovascular risk into its checklist. So points to ponder on. One important thing is if you look at human beings, this is human beings, you look at all these T cells and B cells that are secreted and keep changing. They go to peaks and troughs in the night, which is very interesting to know because these pro-inflammatory cytokines are elevated at rest time, at night. And so when do we give pro-inflammatories? When do you give anti-inflammatories? And how do you treat immune challenges like asthma and other challenges, which is all related to sleep? We have another challenge, and that is age. So we know that as we age, the waking capacity activity, the SCN, that is suprachiasmatic firing, reduces and changes. cortisol changes, temperature changes, melatonin changes, as well as plasma glucose variations are there. And so we're getting into a challenge when we start aging. And I'm talking about aging 50 plus or even 45 plus. I'm not talking about 70 to 80. One of the challenges that you see there is actually the lens getting yellowish. So the amount of light that is hitting the SCN or suprachiasmatic nucleus may be reducing, which reduces the signaling into the other clocks around the body. And one of the ways to probably get over is probably to use food as a cue for stimulating various clocks. And one more important thing is exercise. So if you look at sleep deprivation, we should understand that first there's insomnia that we need to define. Insomnia, this is the newest definition from DSM-5, and people should have at least one of the following to have insomnia: difficulty in initiating sleep, difficulty in maintaining frequent reduction in frequent awakenings or problems returning to sleep, early morning awakenings, and this should be at least present for 3 months. This is insomnia. Whereas sleep deprivation is you don't get enough sleep. Okay, so insomnia and sleep deprivation, people don't get enough sleep, but the major difference is people with insomnia have trouble sleeping even if they have plenty of time to sleep. Whereas sleep deprivation is when people are deprived of time to sleep. So sleep deprivation is a self-inflicted challenge that people are facing these days. For example, people in Mumbai or any other city, they wake up early in the morning to get to work, come home around 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or even 10 o'clock, have dinner and spend some time with family, watch TV, sleep around 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and then don't get enough sleep, do all the social networking and everything, wake up in the morning again. So you're getting sleep deprived. And this is becoming one of our biggest problems these days. And there's another definition of sleep deprivation is called insufficient sleep syndrome. Let me not get into that for this. So how do we measure sleep? We can do the PSGs, actigraphy, that is wearing devices that we can wear, sleep diaries, we can ask patients to write diaries, or sleep questionnaires that they can fill in. So sleep questionnaires like the Pittsburgh Sleep Index is available in various languages, and these have been qualified. So what about medications? Before getting into the medications, we should understand that we should know what the challenge that is affecting the patients. Is it personal problems, work-related problems? Are there any medical endocrine challenges, cardiovascular challenges, or GI challenges, any psychiatric challenges, or any pharmacological drugs that they're giving which can cause sleep deprivation or challenges with sleep, such as centrally acting adrenergic blockers, steroids, stimulants like coffee, for example. So asking people to cut off coffee at least 6 hours before going to sleep is very important. We should know the type of what the challenges is. Are they finding it difficult to fall asleep? Are they finding it difficult to maintain sleep? Are they finding it difficult to morning wake up is too early? So we need to find out what kind of sleep challenges they have. And of course, there's a huge list of drugs that you can give for sleep deprivation, for sleep insomnia. I don't want to go through them, but this is important to note. I can always send them over to you if you want to have them. This is an interesting slide and very important slide. This is cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep. So what is important to tell our patients and for us and friends is something called sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is very important. So the point is, before you sleep, the brain is an organ that can be trained to sleep. Most of us have really got our brain to do things at night with devices like the TVs and telephones, which tell the brain that it is evening or afternoon time. And then when we try to sleep, the brain is going, okay, so why do you need to sleep now? It's only evening and I'm getting enough daylight. So why do you want to sleep? So we need to train our brain and get ourselves to go to sleep in a comfortable environment. And this sleep hygiene is very, very, very important. So I trained myself to go to sleep by 11:30, 10, 11 o'clock, I'm off to sleep most of the days, almost 6 days a week, pretty much. And that has been trained. And so my brain is now trained to sleep and I don't have a sleep problem, knock on wood, because I've been through a sleep hygiene or made it a part of my sleep. Also, maintaining sleep cycles, stimulus control is very important. Do not take a troubles to sleep. Maintain a sleep diary, meditation before going to sleep. All these are very, very interesting and very, very important. So, if you look at sleep hygiene, this is the first thing that we need to look into and help people with. Maybe melatonin would be another good thing to look into for most of our patients. So if you look at circadian rhythm, it's all the challenges, including immune diseases, mood disorders, cancers, enhanced aging, which is what I am interested in as well, kidney diseases, psychiatric diseases, infertility, which is a huge problem for when it comes to OB-GYN, and a lot of our population is having infertility. No sleep, sleep deprivation, infertility. Just low testosterone, low growth hormone, and eating a lot of carbohydrates, infertility. Eye diseases, neurological challenges such as Alzheimer's, and probably early challenges with cognition. Sleep, and of course, sleep challenges and metabolic diseases. So you have the central nervous system, GI, the musculoskeletal system, endocrine system, cardiovascular, you name it. All these systems get deprived and have a problem. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to take any questions if I can. It's a very short presentation. I kept it short.